everyone, and welcome to the OnPoint podcast. Today, I got to speak with Michelle Warner. Michelle has spent nearly 30 years at GSK leading engagement strategies and new approaches to patient insights. We got to discuss the importance of integrating patient insights in order to drive better patient outcomes. I'm really excited for you to hear all of this amazing work that Michelle has done and some of the cool new things she's up to. Welcome to OnPoint, the medical excellence podcast where we talk to pharma leaders about how to build highly effective medical affairs organizations. Today, I am so excited to have Michelle Warner with us. And the reason for this episode is that every medical affairs team that I have a chance to work with has this deep passion around improving patient outcomes, but it's very rare that I actually see deep and meaningful patient engagement and patient insights actually in their strategy. So today we're going to talk with Michelle, who has spent 29 years at GSK, with the majority of that time leading external engagement strategies, including championing innovative approaches to patient insights. Michelle, welcome. I'm so excited to have some time to talk today.
Great to see you again, Scott, and to be here, of course.
Before we jump into patient insights, 29 years at GSK. And I know that it's just coming to an end and you're off onto some new adventures. So before we get started, what is your proudest, most exciting moment from your time at GSK?
I suppose I'm most proud, and this is generally, so not a moment particularly, but I'm most proud of the work that I did with patients, but also with other key stakeholders that then drove patient-centered activities. And the collaborations and the partnerships with the scientific, the clinical, and the patient community were particularly rewarding, as was working with you, of course, Scott. So if you can remember, we were really leveraging data to help influence medical strategy and the approaches to engaging with external stakeholders. So that was invaluable, and I really enjoyed it.
Michelle, out of everybody I've had the chance to work with in the last 15 years, you have always been so passionate about the medical community, the patient community, and just have this magical way of bringing people together towards common goals around patient improvement and finding ways to improve outcomes. So really excited that you're here with us. And it was a lot of fun getting to work with you over the last few years. Let's jump into patient engagement and patient insights. Before we dig in, let's dig into the challenge, right? Because every medical affairs team I've had a chance to work with talks about patient centricity. They talk about patient engagement and patient insights, but very few I'm finding are investing really meaningful time and resources into a plan to generate insights from the patient community and to engage with that patient community. Before we get into how you might do it or how you have done it, why do you think that there's this difference between the aspiration and the reality of people actually doing?
The first thing to say is that it's not surprising. There are few meaningful patient engagement insights if you're looking across the board, because there's been just such a strong focus on physicians and payers actually as the end users rather than patients. And it's been a bit of a recent shift. Secondly, it's actually a high-risk area, rightly so. The laws and the regulations that govern engagements with patients and with patient organizations, they are different from those which govern engagements with HCP. So we're fearful, really, and, we're not exactly the riskiest business in the world, are we?
Right.
We're fearful that there might be some perceived negative impact that then could affect our reputations. What if, for instance, it looked like medical advice was being given by the industry to patients directly? Or what if it was that people thought that the industry was interfering with the physician-patient relationship? So quite a lot of nervousness, I think, is one of those things that's still very much current. And then thirdly, a little bit more nitty-gritty here, but there's significant amount of time and effort needed to build the necessary processes, the necessary skills, the behaviors, the mindset, and so forth. And I think we're still learning together, not just as industry colleagues, but also those that are advocating for patients themselves. They've had to really, as patient organizations, move from this reliance on a core funding model where it was quite transactional and companies would provide a payment that would be given as a grant and off they could go and do their own thing. Now we're really looking at one of much more partnership, really, and that's taking some time for patient advocacy groups to get their heads around.
I know that there's been a lot of recent changes in guidance and in the industry that is encouraging more patient engagement, patient organization engagement. What are some of the things that are enabling, like making it easier or reducing that risk per se that's happening in the industry right now?
Mentioning, as I did a minute ago, about the whole area of partnership, COVID happened and we saw this monumental shift, didn't we, toward really looking at the industry as part of the solution, not the problem. And that would be my simple one-liner response. And then what I think I've done personally is, and there's a lot of people sitting in the same sort of seats as I am who are doing exactly the same, but it's to really make it a personal mission to connect, to collaborate, to partner with the patient as the North Star. And when you've got people that are driving in that way, then you need the right compliance policies, procedures around you, which sometimes you have to build. Like, I think you talk about building the plane while you fly it, but there has definitely been a bit of that in my career and of late in particular. It helps me personally, Scott, because I think I would say that it is personal for me because my mum lived with lots of different health conditions. My daughter has asthma. My father has dementia. I'm actually a cancer survivor. So I think it's quite easy sometimes if you've been a patient and you're looking after somebody as a carer or you've got loved ones that's struggling with that condition, to be that voice and to shout a bit louder. And then the other thing is there's some great examples everywhere. So when you see, for instance, I remember looking at what our HIV team in GSK were doing, and they were absolutely inspiring because instead of there being almost like a company approach to something, it was a shared community goal and it is a shared community goal that the companies, the patients, those that are advocating for them are working on to eliminate HIV. And all of that, I would say, has been helpful for me personally to overcome some of the barriers to having a much more patient-first approach.
Wow, that's amazing. So, Michelle, it sounds like there was a personal passion, a personal drive that really was important to overcoming some of that cultural inertia to be able to make it happen. But then you had to bring along your organization. You had to bring along some changes. So you had support, that you had policy, that you had compliance with you. I think it would be great to just talk through your example, right? You did this anyway. So can you tell us how you went about overcoming these beliefs and overcoming these challenges and bringing GSK and patient together?
Yes, sure. I don't want anybody on this call to be thinking that I'm some sort of a perfect expert here. There's going to be lots and lots of things that I've tried, things that actually didn't work, but I'll just pull on those things that did to make it a bit more helpful. And if I just go back to that comment I made about COVID, I'll probably start there because I vividly remember there being a situation where we wanted to really start to listen properly to patients on an ongoing basis rather than doing, how we might say, I'm going to do an advisory panel or I'm going to have a patient council on this particular topic. Because everything was moving so quickly, we really wanted to understand the lived experience of patients living with certain conditions that the company that I was working for then was interested in and working in the field of. So to be able to ask them to carry a phone around with them, to record themselves, I called it the patient diary series, by the way. And it needed a sit down around the table with legal, with compliance, with the head of the department, with the budget holders, etc. And actually, I needed to get an awful lot of advice about how to actually progress that in the most sensitive and patient and focused way possible. But the must do here, I think, is just taking that really important role that medical affairs have to listen, to learn, and to bring that back to the company and hold on to that as being our reason, our purpose, our objectives, and then ask our colleagues that support us from a legal and compliance perspective, those that are writing the policies, ask them to understand that that is what our objective is and how can that be facilitated so that everybody comes out of this, particularly the patient or a patient organisation, if we're going through the organisation, having had a really positive experience and we've learned and continue to learn as time goes on. So that would be one. Probably another one would be about really once I've managed to establish, for instance, some of the working relationships with the patient groups that represented patients, to be really making sure that the internal stakeholders understood this was not a one-off, 1 year commitment. It needed to be long term. You
Mm.
can't just say, we're going to set up, for instance, I had a patient advocacy advisory board, and that had to run over a period of years to enable us to really work on the whole of that mental development cycle. And so again, to keep people internally really, really motivated, it's fine. Of course, you have to have the buy-in from the outset, but there's that closing of the loop afterwards. So every time that we had insights to be shared, then it was our key stakeholders, our senior leadership that were receiving end of getting those insights, not just buried somewhere in a system. So does that?
It does. I'd love to hear what are some of the things that you were able to learn that was unique because you had that patient perspective that you couldn't have gotten through HCP advisory boards, HCP insights? Because it sounds like if you were able to keep that engagement and had learnings to share for multiple years, there must have been something unique coming out of it.
Gosh, well, of course, there's lots of specific actionable insights, but let me give you something concrete. And this is going back to the patient diary series, which is what we started in COVID. I remember there was actually a husband and wife who spoke to us very candidly about the experience that they had. And it was the patient's wife who had lived that experience more so because her poor husband had been in intensive care. He couldn't remember an awful lot of that experience. And she was the one that was recording on an ongoing basis what was going on as she was trying to work through what was quite a long time period from him being admitted into hospital and coming home again. So we would see just how challenging it was for her to be able to juggle as a carer what was needed to literally get through her day-to-day life and be able to be there for her husband and be able to anticipate his needs on behalf of the healthcare professionals looking after him, as well as, I suppose, giving us the insights in terms of what it was like for a patient who was in such a critical condition. And it was her emotional response to some of the things that were happening in the patient journey that for her were just unacceptable. And we probably wouldn't have thought about. It could be, and I'll give you an example, it could be about having to return to hospital for some of the care that he was wanting to get afterwards or needing to get afterwards, that actually on reflection could have been done through an at-home route. So we started to look at some of the at-home administration and some of the support tools, etc., that could be given to somebody living with that condition who'd had COVID, who was then trying to recover as much as possible in their own environment. So it was that's just a flavour of the types of things that we were able to do.
Fantastic. And you had talked about the importance of getting your partners engaged early. What were some of the ways that you ensured that the medical teams and your compliance team and legal team understood and were bought into helping to find a way to make this happen?
Yeah, so part of it is based on we would have everybody's got a medical plan for the year, and there might be I've come from a scientific communications background most latterly. So if I just even think about 2023, I remember looking at plan for how we were going to communicate science, data, evidence that was really key, and asking the question of different medical medicine teams and vaccine teams that I was working with, how do we bring the patient front and center? Even at things like congressing that are very time consuming, can take 6, 9, probably 12 months, in fact, dependent on the size of the conference, 12 months to plan for. And there's obviously there needed to be the help that we would have to have, and I've already mentioned it, from compliance and legal, but there also had to be the contracting side of things. I was trying to, alongside colleagues, make sure that it was patient voice that was coming through on the booths, on the symposia, even abstract. And that was a new area that I had not explored before. One of our insights leads had some fantastic insights to share. There was the need for us to put that information into abstract data to submit to the conference, and 3 of them got accepted. So we were facing a new challenge. How do we present the data without having the patient there, but at least the patient representative?
Mm.
So every example that I can think of, just with that one element of a medical strategy and medical plan, with that, actually, where does the patient voice sit here, led to there needing to be many more than just myself and others in my role sitting around the table being able to make it happen. It's truly a team approach.
Some of these initiatives sound amazing, but a lot of folks listening might go, we're nowhere close. Like, we can't deploy recording devices. We can't do a diary series. Like, that sounds amazing, but it's too far out. Tell us maybe some advice. Where would you start if you had somebody in your organization really passionate about the patient voice, and they were going to get support to begin investing in a program and an approach? Where would you advise that they start?
Okay, so I'd probably start at patient organization level, because let's face it, what we're not going to do is go and find a man on the street, split patient, and just work with that one individual, because we would ideally want to, if it was an in-country activity, you'd want to be working with the patient organizations who could represent the voice and the needs and the expectations of all of those patients, and then might put you in touch with patients living with that particular disease or condition. And if, like me, you're working at a global level, you're going to need to make sure that you've got a bigger than just one country perspective on things. So that's why I'd probably start with patient organizations. And everybody knows that there are some clear guides, certainly from the ABPI point of view. For those of us working in the UK, you've got some very clear guidance on how to work with patient organizations. So let me break it down a little bit. I'd start with the who, so which patient organizations, and I definitely wouldn't necessarily rely on some really snazzy platform and trying to buy something if you don't already have it, because all of us have got so much data at our own fingertips, and it's not difficult to do the desk research ourselves. Identifying who could be in that group and then prioritizing, and this won't be news to anybody, but the types of things that I did to prioritize which organizations to work with was to look at actually what's their size, their reach, and their impact, and then what's their alignment to our medical strategy. And then the third bit is about their willingness to work with the industry. So prioritization is key. And then once you've got which organizations that you're targeting, actually who are the individuals within them. And quite often you'll find that some people are working leading education, some people are leading advocacy, some people are leading research. So dependent on what you're trying to achieve, you could even really drill down to the specific who in terms of individuals. So I'd start there, and then the what. I'd go, and this is based on what I, again, have done myself. So first, it's about developing a really deep understanding, being as curious as possible, familiarizing myself with the goals, the mission, the focus areas that we can all find on websites and so forth, looking at their resources, watching the videos from patients that they might have, so that I can get a much better understanding of where there might be that mutual interest. And then planning that initial approach, rather than be thinking about it, if it's me, that's say in the seat as responsible, I'd be thinking, actually, who's best placed in my network in the company to be able to get the right first impression? Because those first impressions really do count. And if it's not me, if there is somebody who is better known, fantastic, let's go through that individual or those individuals. might even be an external expert. One of my first
Mhm.
ever experiences was with Asthma and Lung UK. And I remember that the key opinion leader, who was the medical director at the time, and I knew very well, I remember him introducing me to the patient organisation, and that just worked so well because you've got that credibility right from the outset. And then in terms of that first impression, still being really clear about why, what is the objective, what's in it for them, not you know how some people just do, hey, I work for this company and this is what we do and this is me and this is what I do. Actually, they're not really that interested in that bit. What they're really interested in is what's in it for them.
What are some examples of value that organizations, medical affairs teams can provide? So when you're reaching out and you're trying to make that connection, what are some examples of things that you might say?
Okay, so again, if I think back to, is it about advocacy or is it about education or is it about research? Those being the most common areas. Say it's research. We are a research organization, company that I was working in. So it could very well be that the hook's not the right word, but you know, the value to them is that we also have statisticians. We also have the ability to put together with medical writers some research projects, turning them into abstracts and manuscripts, and we could get published together. So it could be that, or it could be that we're wanting to do some joint education. There might be a world awareness day rather than there being
Mhm.
companies galore setting up their own initiatives. How about that's something that we do together and let's have that conversation. Sometimes it's about really knowing specifically what you might want to be able to offer or what might be of interest, but other times it could be quite broad and it could be just literally in the topic area of driving policy or
Mhm.
in the topic area of educating healthcare professionals. Would you be interested in us bringing our expertise together as partners? That kind of thing.
So you start with identifying those organizations and really prioritizing based on reach and size, their alignment, their willingness to work, find specific individuals because it's going to be a person to person relationship. Understand, I love the idea. I can tell when people call and they want to partner with us, people who know what we do and they've watched our videos and read our blogs and come actually interested versus coming with their own agenda. So I love that. And then when you start to reach in, really look for what is the mission or the priority of that organization right now, advocacy, education, research, and come in discussing partnerships. Um, I want to hone in on something that I think you said that might be a little bit different, unique. You mentioned partnerships, but it sounded like it might be more broad than just you and the patient organization. Did I catch that right?
I was saying that sometimes you might have companies that are doing ABC, obviously, and HIV might be a good example where you might have Gilead and GSK. Uh, Actually, how much more powerful if even the companies work together. And there was one fantastic example that actually would probably be a bit of a highlight from my time most latterly in the company, which was when we had 6 different companies all working in that particular therapy area alongside a medical society who themselves had patient harm that was absolutely dedicated to patient advocacy, and another global patient organization with members across the world, all working together with one particular objective to try and make sure that respiratory was on the agendas of policymakers across the world, starting in Europe, but ideally it would go beyond that, but certainly at European level. And then all the resources that were going into things like what should we do on World Asthma Day or World COPD Day, because actually we had this really phenomenal agreement in place with one agency doing one piece of work on behalf of this independent international respiratory coalition, but one that we were partners in, then, you know, it was always going to be so much more impactful.
It does seem though that for some of these cross organization, cross medical team, pharma company partnerships to work, it goes back to something you said earlier around really understanding that patient journey, right? And you're not going to necessarily collaborate on the medicine, but it sounds like
Oh,
there's a
no,
lot of there's so many parts to that patient journey that everybody would care about. And really understanding what those are seems really important.
and actually, that patient journey, we talked about it being part and parcel of a medicine development journey for as long as I can remember. But I think what's happening now, Scott, is that people are giving it very much more of a focus in terms of keeping it alive and kicking routinely in a much more authentic, timely way than annual business review. Let's
Right.
review our patient journey. Those insights are needed just as they are on the HCP insight front, day in, day out, in order for us to spot something can be actioned and should be actioned for the benefit of a better patient outcome.
Uh, Let's maybe just share with everybody, if you're okay with that. You're stepping away from GSK. You just stepped away, but you seem more passionate than ever about patient engagement, patient insights. Can you tell us what's next for you?
It's only been a month since I've stepped away, and it was the most phenomenal career. I cannot thank the company enough for the opportunity to learn everything that I learned and the privilege of working on some of the most phenomenal medicines with them and vaccines with the most phenomenal people. So thank you, GSK. But yes, I've set myself up as an independent consultant, and that's predominantly so that I can work on behalf of a UK-based award-winning training department called our training department. And so that's already in play. And I hope very much to be able to bring my passion around patient engagement to the training department. But I'm also setting up a business with a colleague, very early days, but this is the one that I have super level of excitement about, which towards the end of the year, I think, will be up and running properly. But that's really about helping to bring patient insights to companies that don't have that in-house resource or expertise. So if anybody out there is looking for help, be able to see around corners and preempt some of those insights, watch this space in the coming months.
That is super exciting. And I can't think of anyone better to bring in patient insights. Your experience about how to get it done and your passion around doing it is always just so authentic. And any partnership, especially when you're working with patients and working with patient organizations, it's so clear when somebody isn't authentic. And really, anybody who would be interested in learning and finding ways to bring those patient insights in, I highly encourage you to reach out to Michelle and her team. That sounds like it's coming together. Michelle, how would somebody contact you if they were interested in learning more?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best route for now. And then obviously as things progress, you'll be the first to know, Scott. As things progress, then there'll be a website and there'll be other ways of being able to make content.
Perfect. I will put your LinkedIn contact in the show notes. Follow Michelle, find out what is coming next with patient insights. And Michelle, thank you so much. I think that everyone who's going to listen to this and hear it will not just walk away with some clear, actionable next steps of things they could get started on, but also passion and excitement to do so. So, again, thank you so much. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thanks, Scott. And a big thank you for everybody that's joined. As Scott said, I'm here if anybody wants to connect, and I'd be fascinated to hear from any of you about anything that you've been doing I could learn from too.